The Wyoming sun was setting in streaks of orange and red, casting long shadows across the barren fields. Dust clung to every surface, and the faint smell of hay mixed with the ache of hunger that never seemed to leave Daniel Carter anymore. He was only 27, but the years had carved lines into his face deeper than most men twice his age. His ranch, once full of promise, had shrunk into a patch of struggling pasture with just 2 sickly cows left. Debt collectors came often, and the neighbors had stopped lending help. That night, Daniel sat on the creaking porch, staring at the horizon, wondering how long he could keep the wolves from his door. His mother had passed when he was a boy, his father 2 winters ago, and all that remained of the Carter name was him, and a ranch so poor it barely deserved the title. The offer came on a day when his belly was empty and his hope even emptier. Old Henry Miller, a wealthy cattleman, arrived at Daniel's ranch with a smirk tugging at his lips. He looked Daniel up and down before speaking. "You need a cow, don't ya, boy? Yours look like they're about to keel over," Henry said, chewing a piece of tobacco. Daniel sighed, worn from pride and desperation. "What are you asking, Henry?" Henry's grin widened. "Simple, I'll give you a fine milk cow. But on one condition, you marry my cousin, Martha." Daniel blinked in disbelief. He had heard whispers about Martha. She was 40, weighed nearly 400 pounds, and was known in town as a woman nobody wanted. "Why?" he asked cautiously. Henry spat on the dirt. "She's been shamed long enough. Folks laugh, call her names. She deserves a man's name beside hers. And you, well, you deserve a cow." The cruelty of the bargain stung, but the hunger in Daniel's gut and the hopelessness in his chest overpowered his pride. He thought of his ranch, his future, the animals dying slowly without milk or trade. At last, he lowered his head. "I'll do it." The next week, in a quiet, awkward ceremony, Daniel stood beside Martha Miller. She wore a faded dress stretched too tight, her hair pinned neatly, her eyes downcast. She said her vows in a soft, trembling voice, while Daniel mumbled his. There was no kiss, just the weight of shame pressing on them both. That night, in the small cabin Daniel called home, Martha entered the bedroom first. Daniel followed hesitantly, unsure of what to say. He had married her for a cow. She knew it, he knew it, and yet, when Martha turned and softly whispered, "You can take the bed, I'll sleep in the chair," Daniel was stunned. He frowned. "No, it's your bed too." Martha shook her head and walked to the door. She closed it firmly and turned the lock. Then she whispered, her voice breaking, "Don't worry. I know you didn't want this. You'll have your cow, and I'll have my dignity. I'll never make you touch me against your will." Daniel stood in silence, watching her curl up in the wooden chair by the window, her large body shifting uncomfortably but her face filled with quiet resolve. In that moment, something stirred inside him, not desire, not pity, but respect. Days turned to weeks. Martha kept to herself, cooking simple meals, tending the cow Henry had given. She was quiet, often humming while she worked, though never smiling. She didn't demand affection or company. She carried her weight with shame, shoulders hunched, as though trying to shrink herself from the world. At first, Daniel kept his distance, but he began to notice things. When storms rolled in, Martha stayed up all night, making sure the cows were safe. When Daniel came home bone-tired from the fields, she would quietly place a bowl of stew before him without a word. When neighbors came around to mock or pry, she stood like a wall between him and their cruelty, daring anyone to speak ill of her husband. One evening, after another long day, Daniel found her outside, struggling to fix a broken fence post. Her hands were blistered, her breath heavy, but she kept at it. Daniel rushed to help, saying, "You'll wear yourself out. Let me." Martha looked up at him, sweat on her brow, and whispered, "I'm just trying to earn my keep." That night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, he thought not of her size, not of the shame Henry had intended, but of her heart. She worked without complaint, gave without expectation, and bore the weight of ridicule without bitterness. Slowly, their lives began to intertwine. Daniel started helping her with the cooking, and Martha laughed, a small, shy laugh, when he burned the biscuits. He noticed how her eyes lit up when she spoke about her childhood, how she loved wildflowers, how she could sing old hymns in a voice rich and beautiful. One night, months later, a blizzard swept across the plains. The barn roof threatened to collapse under the snow, and the cattle bawled in panic. Daniel ran into the storm, but the winds were brutal. Suddenly, Martha appeared beside him, holding a lantern, her figure looming strong against the storm. Together, they shoveled snow, reinforced the beams, and saved the cattle. By the time they staggered back inside, frost clinging to their hair, Daniel looked at her differently. She wasn't a burden. She was his partner. It wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't romance spun from fairy tales. But slowly, Daniel's heart softened. He began to see Martha not as Henry's cruel joke but as a woman of remarkable strength and gentleness. The turning point came one spring morning. Daniel awoke to find Martha gone. Panic surged, and he ran outside. He found her kneeling in the field, cradling a calf that had been born too early, whispering soft encouragements as though her words alone could keep it alive. She didn't see Daniel watching, but he saw something in her, a fierce tenderness, a mother's heart that the world had ignored. He walked up quietly and knelt beside her. "Martha," he whispered, "you don't have to prove anything to me. You've already given me more than I ever deserved." She looked at him, her eyes wide, tears mixing with the dirt on her face. "But you never wanted me. I was just the price of a cow." Daniel took her hands in his. "That may have been how it started. But it isn't how it ends. You're more than a bargain, Martha. You're the reason this ranch still stands. You're the reason I still stand." For the first time since they married, Martha let out a sob, not of sorrow, but of release. She had locked the door that first night to protect her dignity, but now Daniel unlocked the door of her heart with simple, honest words. From that day forward, their marriage changed. They shared meals at the same table, laughter in the evenings, prayers before bed. Daniel began to love her in a way deeper than appearance, and Martha began to believe she was worthy of love. Years passed, and the ranch flourished. The cow Henry had offered as a cruel bargain had multiplied into a herd. Neighbors who once mocked now came to Daniel and Martha for advice, humbled by the strength of their bond. And on the anniversary of their wedding, Daniel placed a wildflower crown on Martha's head and whispered, "You were never my burden. You've always been my blessing." She smiled through tears, her heart swelling with a joy she had never thought possible. The story of Daniel and Martha spread quietly through the valley, a tale not of shame but of redemption. People began to see Martha differently, not as the woman Henry had ridiculed, but as a wife who turned a bargain into a bond, a stranger into a soulmate. In the end, it wasn't a cow that saved Daniel's ranch. It was compassion, dignity, and the quiet strength of a woman who had once locked a door to guard her pride but had, in time, opened her heart to love. And Daniel, the poor rancher, learned that the greatest wealth was not measured in cattle or land but in the gift of a partner who stood beside him when the world had turned away.